Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. I'm excited to talk to you all about how I work and how I implement strategies that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion on the local and national level. So, to tell you a bit more about me, my name is Princella Talley. I live in the Deep South, specifically in the Twin Cities of Pineville and Alexandria, Louisiana. I have two roles within CCL. One is working as a development associate with the development team, and the other is working as a diversity outreach coordinator. I began as a volunteer with CCL in 2016, and I started working officially with the organization last year in January of 2019. But my story as an environmentalist began long before joining CCL when I grew up in a community that was overexposed to air, water, and soil contamination. Many of us got sick, the FBI was involved, and there were lawsuits, but the end result, an apology for that, was only distributing a $500 check to residents because it was known that it was a low-income area and that was money that people needed, so it wouldn't be refused. And many of us still feel the health impacts of that today, myself included. And it was this situation that really inspired me to learn more about my environment, environmental health, and environmental justice. Over the years, I was primarily a protester, and I found my way into learning the importance of food systems, along with climate and income inequality, by volunteering in other low-income communities and working at the largest organic farm in our state. I also started my own local nonprofit with a focus on art as environmental advocacy and food equity. And these experiments and projects and volunteer time really reframed my CCL approach, and it allows me to use my understanding of community and growing up in a marginalized community to shape my messaging around the issue of climate change. A part of my national work with CCL is my action team, Climate and Culture. We started in March of 2019, and we currently have 105 members. And our focus last year was just to grow and to become comfortable with one another inside of CCL. And this year, we're focusing more on inclusion as we continue to expand, and anyone is welcome to join this team. The way I built this team out was by focusing on the components you see here. I want everyone to think in an innovative way and not be afraid to take risk, and also to reduce their defensiveness so that we can make sound decisions together. But none of these things can happen if we don't have a strong sense of psychological safety. And that's the main piece I want you to take away from this slide and begin to integrate into your local chapter. Amy Edmondson, a Harvard Business School professor, defines psychological safety as the belief that one would not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. This was something I also spoke about at our November conference, and quite a few people had questions about that. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to contact me directly. So the next time you're at a chapter meeting, gauge the interactions and the things that are happening. Is it only the same few people speaking all the time? And is everyone encouraged to say how they really feel? Because if your goal is to recruit and maintain a membership that's truly diverse, people have to see that many different thoughts and ideas are welcomed and encouraged. So it's up to you and your chapter members to decide the best strategies to create a culture of psychological safety. But it has to happen before you start to bring others in. And that's why I show you this chart. From our action team, creating that culture of psychological safety is what allows us to all get along and have a voice and not feel embarrassed or hesitant. So we have people from all walks of life with various gender identities, ages, socioeconomic backgrounds, political affiliations, and race. but we wouldn't have that comfort if we weren't intentional about providing that psychological safety. Another example I can give you is our Third Coast Regional Conference. Our local chapter was able to bring 47 people, a mixture of youth and adults, to the conference, and 44 were people of color. And this happened because we spent years building trust with community leaders and nonprofit owners without obligating them to be a part of CCL at the start or telling them that their focus was to get our bill passed. They knew who we were, and they put trust in us because we were at various community events and we were working together for the overall good of the community. Everything we did over those years was not climate specific, but I think it's really important to remember that climate change is such an intersectional issue that most things other groups are working on will intersect with our work in some way. We have to decide if we are committed to diversity efforts enough to not always be the leader, but to create our own model of a co-beneficial relationship. Sometimes it's better to ask how we can help instead of presenting our needs to someone as what should be the top priority. People will hear us when we show them that we value them by listening and acting on their behalf. So, what does multi-sector collaboration look like in action? And what we have here is a perfect example. So these kids are from Alexandria Middle Magnet Junior High School. The principal had endorsed us on behalf of the school in 2017 because Harry in our chapter, who also has his own nonprofit, had a strong relationship with the teacher. And at the same time, other local nonprofit owners who knew us came as volunteer mentors to help the kids and to learn more about CCL in depth. Meanwhile, the environmental work we've been doing at Good Hope Baptist Church allowed the church members to feel confident in attending with them because we've been working so closely together that they were interested to learn more as well. So as this was in the works, Susan and I knew that access to the conference would present an issue, so we helped to create that access that the students and the adults would need to attend. And we even found a way to create a separate agenda within the conference that merged with specific presentations so that these new climate advocates could learn and have fun without being overwhelmed, because a lot of us already know so much about this work that it can be overwhelming to newcomers. So we were super appreciative and lucky to have Dr. Natasha DeJarnay and Sana Biki there to teach and really inspire everyone. And working with Susan, we took a lot of risk, but we did it to make this happen. And our hope was that our work would inspire everyone who attended to be engaged with us on a deeper level. We didn't say that we cared about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We wanted to show it, and we wanted people to feel it. So what was the result of all this? Well, after the conference, the junior high school decided that they would make their 2021 curriculum about environment and global health after learning from Dr. DeJarnay. They decided to have an Earth Day celebration with Susan Adams as a special guest. And everyone who attended is now actively working with us. So regional diversity in Third Coast increased dramatically because we took those chances and had those relationships built on trust. We will now continue to work together. Something I think that is really important when you're building these relationships is to learn from other sectors. So I'm not looking at other environmental organizations all the time when I'm seeking other ideas or trying to think outside of the box, because we know that we want to bring more diversity into this movement, and we're still moving forward, but we have so many things to figure out. So I look beyond our field to find other strategies that are working for people and that can be filtered into our efforts. So one place where I really see things progressing is in Hollywood. According to a 2019 study from the University of Southern California's Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, they examined gender and underrepresented racial and ethnic status of leading characters from the top 1,200 films between 2007 and 2018. Their report found that 40 of the top 100 highest grossing films in 2018 were led by women, and 28 were led by minorities. The presence of at least one woman of color in a leading role at every major studio contributed to that progress seen in 2018. So what were they doing, and how did they make this happen over time? Those are the sorts of things I like to dig into to develop ideas for my CCL work. So I encourage you to do that as well. If you can look at major companies or other successful initiatives that inspire you, and use those ideas to build a structure with similar actions and processes in mind. Environmental quality is something that I also think we don't talk about enough in the context of community, especially when we're going into communities that are very different from our own. So when we talk about environmental community and quality, we're talking about not just our natural environment. We're talking about the health of the environment, but also the effects that it has on everyone around us and everyone in that area. For some people, it could be how they feel about their parks. For others, it could be how they feel about their water or their concerns about the air. So our conversation about the environment should stay as long as necessary on the key areas that a community wants to focus on. We can't move that conversation along to policy until that community feels comfortable and ready to do so. You may notice, if you know me well or if you've worked with me before, that I'm not always going into ways people should advocate for the bill initially. And that's because political will and policy support is something that has to happen naturally, and our patience has to be there to build the relationships that will allow us to have that conversation. So when we jump directly into our priorities, we're cheating ourselves of conversations that need to be had about improving environmental quality that affects every area of our lives and health. So I like to look at it this way. No one would be fully motivated to build political will for anything if they didn't have a very clear and vivid picture of how it affects their personal world. So the conversations around environment and policy will happen naturally if you challenge yourself to leave space for it in due time. You're doing a service to yourself and to the community that way, and elected officials will be more likely to engage with you when you have broad constituent support and people that can speak up from various communities. So, ask not what the community can do for you, learn what you can do for the community. What do we organically provide to people who join CCL across the board? We encourage people to find their own way. Even if this work would not be their primary focus, we have so many tools that build confidence, help people to learn organizing concepts, and allows people to network in a way that promotes a deeper understanding beyond the differences that we have. I believe our culture of compassion is what will keep people with us and encourage them to invite others. So please remember that words definitely matter, and our good intentions don't always sound good. So when I'm working with people in economically disadvantaged communities who don't know my intentions just yet, I'm very mindful in the things I say. I don't say things like, we need more diversity. It usually sounds like it's tied to a corporate agenda or a numbers game. And there are so many other things we can say to describe this work. So for example, if I were to say to you, we're working to increase diversity in CCL in our local chapter, and someone else says to you, we're working to create a culture of compassion based on truth and equity to create a better world for all of us. Who are you more willing to talk to? I would think person two. So these are our two state coordinators in Louisiana. Ruth is in Shreveport and Richard is part of our local chapter in Alexandria. And they do a really great job of building morale in others. And incentivizing to build morale is something that I always think is really important, not for the recruitment of people, but to retain the people you already have. And it could also work for recruitment in a sense that when new people come and they see the way you're working and the way you appreciate one another, it's likely to inspire them to want to know more. So always show your folks that you're appreciative of their work, and you can incentivize without money. And don't just incentivize when there's been major accomplishments. Dedicate a piece of your chapter to doing this frequently, to celebrating the small and major milestones with the same level of enthusiasm. You want to let everyone know that you appreciate all of their efforts without favoritism or judgment towards the amount of progress that they made. So, my 1, 2, 3 approach and a commitment to action. I think it's really important to ask these questions. What do I have to offer that's unique in comparison to what's already available? If John, who I know, already provides similar opportunities, then why would I need the same thing from a stranger? You have to do your research to see what makes you the unicorn. What are you providing that's unique through your CCL chapter that would appeal to your target audience and issue? The next question, can you pull off any project that you want to do, even if it's just outreach? How can you pull this off effectively? So do you have the capacity? You have to be realistic about how many people are willing to work alongside you based on where you are right now. Who's willing to engage and who's willing to support your work? And as your project gets bigger and you need to scale it, who's willing to come on board with you? It's important to confirm these things instead of assuming them in the beginning, because you don't want your project to overwhelm you or anyone in your chapter, and you don't want it to feel stagnant. 3, when do you let go? When it's time to step back and let someone else manage your project, or when it's time to drop the project or simply make some tweaks and changes to it, you'll know. And you'll know because either the project won't continue to move forward, or you'll see people losing their spirit about it. They won't have the same motivation and excitement around it. My 1, 2, 3 approach, as you ask these 3 questions, comes from my experience and my tendency to fall into analysis paralysis, where I like to overthink things before taking an action. So in my experience, I've learned that I push myself to action when I set a timeline. So it should take no longer than 3 weeks to take 3 physical actions, big or small. It could be as small as making that phone call to someone you wanted to talk to about your CCL work, who you've never talked to before. As you take these 3 actions, big or small, doesn't matter how small, do you have 2 people who are willing to take similar actions with you, connected to one idea? You're taking 3 actions with 2 other people who are sharing with you in one goal or idea. I do this because if I don't get out there talking to people and working against my fear of failure, I'll find myself writing plans and thinking about how to do something. But I've learned that the only way to know if I'm doing it right or wrong or how to revise my idea is by trying it out, not by crafting plans in my own bubble and hoping things will go well. Because if they fail, then I know to try again in a different way, and that's okay. And I know when to let things go through evaluation. The 3 I's of evaluation. And I'm sure you've seen this in other models. When you look at different community engagement strategies, it may not be worded the same, but these are key terms you'll run into often. Insight. When you wrap up a project or when you're digging deeply into it, what did everyone think about the effort? Improvement. Find out, how could it have been better? Involvement. How are you involving more people, including your opposition? Evaluate with everyone to create a shared sense of power. And this is really important because sometimes when we're evaluating, we tend to do it with the core members of our group. But it's important to let everyone feel as if they had a role in the evaluation process, not just so they can know that they contributed, but that their voice matters. You're sharing the power. So I want to thank you so much for joining me for this. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you had some really valuable takeaways. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions or if you want to dive deeper into any of these topics. My cell phone number, you can text me there. You can send me an email, whichever works best for you. Thank you again.